Ladies and gentlemen, and variations thereof, welcome again to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. My name is Rotten Deadite, and with me today are...
Felix, also known as Banu Hanamasaishi.
James, also known as Aramithius.
And I'm Andrew, also known as the White Claw.
Boy, you have 5 minutes to stop before I kick you off this podcast.
I thought you got that out of your system already.
Resist.
Today we're talking about Kyne. I don't know how ASMR is related. But,
It seems like a good idea at the time.
yeah, lore that, damn it.
Kynareth, Haba, deity of many names and many faces.
Also...
And many purviews, actually.
Unusually, it feels like, for this series of casts that we're doing, this is actually a divine that we have a gigantic amount of information about, at least compared to other ones. And,
this is good.
Yeah, and that's really, nice, but it's still not even, still doesn't even hold a candle to the amount of data that we've got about various Daedra, and I'm looking at you, Sheogorath. But,
oh, we're gonna have so much fun with that.
Yeah, it's a multi-part one, and it's gonna be mostly me rolling my eyes at all the cheese memes.
Yeah.
So here's the thing about Kyne. One of the first things you're going to read about when you're talking about the Nordic version of Kynareth is that Kyne is supposed to be the wife of Shor. What I want to know...
she's the...
Right? What I want to know is... What was Kyne like before Shor? In pre-Tiber Septim...
Well, okay, so also I think that we do have to talk about the fact that Kyne, if I recall correctly, was the war wife of Shor,
right.
And Debella was the bed wife of Shor.
Mm-hmm. Which we copied, so, we covered the multiple wives thing in the Nordcast, right?
Ish.
I don't know, I wasn't part of that one, I don't think.
Oh,
we
okay.
did
I don't remember.
slightly.
Okay, good.
All right. Yeah, I think we covered it, but basically the short of it was that it's based on actual Nordic mythology of Nordic heroes having multiple wives that serve numerous purposes, including just keeping the house together, and the war wife that you bring with you to the actual battlefield, and then there's the wife who pines for you when you're away from the house, and then there's the wife whose responsibility it is to take the dogs out. And then there's the wife who folds your clothes properly, and
which is actually kind of like the orcs' way of doing
I was just
things.
thinking that.
And that's which it's in and of itself is interesting, and I don't remember if we discussed that, but it is something that bears some consideration of is there a little bit of cultural appropriation happening between the orcs and the Nords, considering they have had a fair amount of interaction. But let's get back onto the subject again, Nelson. So Kyne is supposed to be
about to say I think yes, because if you look at Kyne as the hawk, as kind of in the proto-Nordic sense, there's not really any relation between the totems. When you look at them generally, that's just you've got the bear, the moth, the hawk. They are their own thing. They only function as a unified pantheon as they get more evolved. So I think part of the way that they get knitted together with the early orcish influences, because Morlock comes up in the earliest tales anyway. So the idea that Nords don't influence, or the idea that orcs don't influence Nordic culture, feels a little odd to me.
Hi, Reg.
And I think Kynareth Kyne is a good example of that one.
Yeah. That's not an ASMR cast. Stop it.
Please no.
Yeah. And but what's interesting about this is that this is something I know for a fact that we covered in the Nordcast, which is that Nords consider Mara to be the mother goddess or the mother wife, sort of.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. But that Kyne is supposed to be the sort of the warrior goddess. And in Nordic mythology, Kyne is the god that gives the Nords the power of Thum. I'm waiting for somebody to tell me I'm wrong about that.
That was her gift.
Yes.
Well, when she also breathed life into the Nords, right? Did you already say that?
She breathed atop Snowthroat, and thus the Nords were born as a people, which is why they call themselves the sons and daughters of Kyne. The Nords also have a great seething hatred for Kynareth, whom they refer to as a pale shadow of Kyne.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that one. I think are you misremembering the line where Kyne and Kynareth are referred to as pale shadows of Tava in one of the ESO Lawmaster's archives? Because that line is explicitly there in reference to Tava, not Kyne. Just to be a thorough pedant.
I think I'm remembering the same thing.
That could be it, in which case I apologize.
Yeah.
Yeah, Children of the Sky, Children of Skyrim.
Yeah. There's also something in me that wants to point out a completely wrong theory about how that kind of being created and breathed on through the throat of the world is potentially totally allegorical. Because I thought I had this really ridiculously neat theory about it. I thought I had this really, really neat theory that would explain it. Because I got my Nordic kings mixed up. Because Wolfarth is referred to as the breath of Kyne, and I somehow in my head got it that Wolfarth was the first king to disavow all the lands in Atmora, and so they became the Nords, as in not Atmorans, when the breath of Kyne made them so, as in when Wolfarth divorced them from Atmora. But that's not actually the case, because Harald is the king who did that. I thought that was some vaguely nice tie-in, but no. I'm just curious about how that kind of plays out with the creation of the Nords as well. But sorry.
Well, I was going to say that I actually spent the last 2 weeks. Well, mostly I spent the previous week trying to do some research into the certain Gnostic idea of the breath of God and the Word of God as powers and the manifestation of the power of the Lord, and then work happened, and life found a way and kept me from getting absolutely anything done outside of the office. And so I the only things that I managed to get was sort of like the beginning, like the proto research of finding a couple of papers written about the connection between the Word of God and the breath of God. But mostly a lot of lines referring to parts of the Bible where they talk about how God breathes life into things, and it wasn't really but it was like a whole bunch of references of, oh yeah, God breathes on stuff, but it wasn't like useful in any way. There wasn't like actual information there. It was just like reference data. It's like, yeah, I know, I can find the spot in the Bible where it says that. Thank you. But the idea of Kynareth or Kyne breathing life into things is probably sort of like another injection of Christian mysticism into, or mythology into the Elder Scrolls mythology. But it is also what I did instead. What I did find. Oh yes, exactly. Thanks, Buck. That always. Yeah, right. Amun. Exactly. Thank you. Man, I damn near forgot about that. I'm so glad you're here. There's if anybody who's watching this cast has time to dig into Amun, AMUN, Alpha Mike Ultra November. There's a lot of very useful text in there about breathing as an act of creating life. And the one thing that I was able to find was some very interesting research done by some comparative religion guys, where they talked about the representation or the sort of mythification of breath in early cultures, and their conclusion, which is probably obvious to anybody with anything between their ears, is that it's pretty much a sort of like proto-science explaining why people don't breathe after they die, or people who can't breathe die. And so it's a sort of a proto science that you get a lot of in both West Asian cultures or Middle Eastern cultures in very, very early very, very early cultures. And then something you also start to see in East Indian and East Asian cultures when you start dealing with things like like any Asian file will be able to talk a lot about qi and qigong and breath energy and stuff like that. It's all all of those things are kind of like filtering back together again from a very early Mesopotamian mythology about breathing life into stuff. And all that has to do with Eremithius's beard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but you see, I'm glad someone else pointed it out, because I pointed it out to you, James. And, hey, by the way, congrats on the epic beard over the past 20 or so episodes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Getting back. Go ahead.
I was going to say that I wanted to sort of encapsulate all of that by saying that's basically the grand summation of all the research I managed to get done. That's it. Did I get any conclusions made? Nope.
Well, I did.
It's enough.
I did a Google search just now because that's how I do my research.
On the day it's
seat of my pants. There we go. Yeah.
Yep.
So I looked up the symbolism of breath in general, rather than just the skies or whatever. And Jung actually has some things to say about breath. There's a connection between breath and spirit.
Check your bingo card, people.
Yep.
And in Jung's book, Symbols of Transformation, he observes that in Arabic and Hebrew, the word ruh signifies breath and spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that and he implies that the two movements of breathing, intaking and inhalation and exhalation, those could symbolize the alternating rhythm of life and death, which is interesting because Kynareth breathed life into the Nords. Life and the cycles therein, that's Arcayth's purview.
Okay. I'm glad you touched on that, but I got something to add. But I'll
I've always kind of operated on the notion that Kynareth, part of what she does is, if we consider like the dream sleeve and how souls are the memories are returned to Mundus, and I imagine the one way that makes the most sense is by rain, which would be that's within Kynareth's sphere. So she must be some kind of gatekeeper between life and death. She's got Arcayth, who's making the cycle occur, and Kynareth, who's there splitting the souls apart, and then breathing or crying the memories back into.
So this is what I wanted to touch on when you first brought up that sort of connection with Arcayth. Is according to the Nords, Kyne is also called the kiss at the end. And she's the one who actually is supposed to lead the souls as it's escaping the body with the last breath. She's the kiss at the end. Breath. And so she's taking them and lifting them up to Sovngarde. That's sort of her sphere, and then she hands it over to Arcayth.
I'd like to see like an apocrypha or something about looking at Kyne or Kynareth in that light. It's the same way God giveth, God taketh away, that kind of thing. This is my gift to you, and I will get it back.
Yeah, there's also another one that comes up in the Kyne's challenge book, that it's not just the Nords that she does it for, or at least the Nords don't think so. There's actually there's one instance where it's got Kyne leading a skeever's soul to Periite. She's which is
here you go, I brought you a rat.
Yeah. She's not just about the Nords, it's about putting things in their place and being that sort of order thing, which kind of ties into Kyne as a nature goddess. She is the closest thing we have to a Mother Earth analog within that, which I'll get to a bit later as well. But it's just bizarre that she's not just a psychopomp for the Nords. She's a psychopomp for everything. So she won't just lead people to Sovngarde. She'll take them wherever they will go.
Yeah. Well, and another thought I had just now in figuring out where different Etata relate to one another. I mean, I can think of kind of a tentative link to Trinimac, which I mean, get into like the multiple wives bit sort of. Because after Lord Khan's heart was ripped from his chest by Trinimac, that was when Kyne started making rain. It was her tears.
Yeah, there had been no recorded rain prior to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean that's a connection to Shore, to Trinimac, and therefore to Malakath. Which, circling back to the multiple wives, we got orcs, we've got Nords. I mean, maybe that's the byway that we have the connection.
Well, there's also an ever so slight connection to Sheogorath there, because Sheogorath was born from the hole in Lorkhan's chest when his divine spark was removed.
Right.
So there's kind of a lot of stuff happening around this one little event.
Yeah, I mean that's why convention's so important.
Yeah.
Yep. But
and it's
as you and James were both saying with regards to it's kind of the closest we have to a Mother Earth, at least as far as the Nordic pantheon is concerned. She is referred to as a mother goddess, but in the sense that we're still talking about Kyne and by extension the Nords, because we're talking about this aspect. She's the oldest aspect, as it were. Mm-hmm. It's also important to remember that the classic Nord tradition in the old gods is very totemic, so it has a lot of natural influence just through that, which, in case anyone has been asking in the chat or has the thought about it now that I brought it up, that's why you don't see Ifre or Ifer or Jeffrey, as he's sometimes called. You don't really see him as a god to the Nords because they have a different worldview due to their perspective from Atmora and moving into Skyrim early on in I think it was the Merethic era when they first touched down. Mm-hmm. Or was it the first era? I can't remember. I'm not up to date with my Nordic days, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had to write the first one.
Yeah, because I think it's the beginning of the first era where they come back from Atmora.
Yeah. So how do you explain the Khajiit perspective then? Because the Khajiit have both Kynareth and Yifa. They're the only pantheon to do that. You're right that Ifri is the kind of the nature side of things for the Moorish gods, but you've got Khajiit who have both, and I'm not entirely sure why they would if they're things that are that connected.
See, I don't know why you're asking me, because the beast races are easily my weakest spot of the lore.
Well, can anybody think of any?
Which is why I want to play ESO and really delve into that shit.
Where's that going when you?
Can anybody think of any?
Where's Moosh, your leader? We didn't need him.
Can anybody think of any elvish air deities?
Does Finaster count?
Yeah, see, I was kind of thinking about Finaster a little bit. Yeah.
He might.
I was possibly thinking about. Was it Sirabane who led the Orflag's navy? It's the closest one.
Yes.
The closest one.
No. Hang on.
That's the closest I can come to.
The Orflag's navy was led by Bendu Olo, a Red Guard.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that. The Altma's contribution to the Orflag's navy, the leader of that is the closest, who then became a hero god, is the closest I could find to anything approaching wind in the Altmeri pantheon. At least if we're going by the varieties of faith way of talking about it, because no one else has a real connection.
So in the at least in the Altmeri pantheon, we've got Ariel, who is also depicted as an eagle or a hawk.
True.
Right.
And then we've got Ifre as well.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think more of plant life and rain or water being absorbed rather than being created or transferred. It's just the taking of that life, and then growing with that. But Ariel is probably the closest, which I mean that would create, I think, a link between Kynareth and Akatosh.
But if you look at, I'm thinking about the invocation of the third pocket guide, which is, "Come to me, Kynareth, for without you I might not know the mysteries of the world, and so blind and in error I might consume and profane the abundance of your beautiful treasures," which, apart from tying respiration and inspiration, it also ties Kynareth to the natural world in a way that we don't see elsewhere. There's actually there is a book somewhere that makes it quite explicit that she's kind of knitting the world together, but I can't remember exactly how that works. I mean, I kind of came up with the idea of wind, which goes to breath, which is obvious, and then breath goes to vitality, and vitality is in infusing the earth with stuff. But yeah,
well, that's interesting. You use those
brought
words
up that one because another related kind of text, where it's not the ones that says, come to me this, and it's these sort of indications, but it's another book called The 10 Commands of the 9 Divines.
Yes, that's the other one.
And Kynareth's entry in there says, number 6, Kynareth says, "Use nature's gifts wisely, respect her power, and fear her fury." So that to me is kind of really cementing that she's kind of taken the place of the nature god for the Nords.
Yep. And the sky god, which is kind of bizarre. I was kind of thinking about real world stuff, and if she's something like Mother Earth, if we're talking Gaia and so on, but she's also Father Sky. She is also Uranus, because she's connected to the upper air and so on.
Andrew,
at least I didn't ASMR it.
It's not a mercy.
Well,
no.
Yeah,
because
actually, that's something
kind of the totality, which is
and it's something that Buck just pointed out in chat, which is really interesting to me, is that there's a lot of cultures, real world cultures, who draw a difference between the presence of life and the ability to do something, and then the actual act of doing a thing. There's a lot of cultures that draw the difference between those two. There's the ability to perform an action, and then there's the actual act of doing that. There's the actual action itself, like actually doing it. And that the difference between, or that the role that breath or wind puts into place is that it is the motivation, in other words, the movement of something. Right, and then exactly, and it's Hathor, the sun, moving, or excuse me, that Horus is the act of Hathor moving through the sky, I think, and so that's geez, I should have thought about this a little bit more before I opened my mouth, but it's the it's the idea
to do like a Hindu equivalent.
Well, sort of. It's the idea of breath being not necessarily life itself, but life in movement, or the life in animation. And it's sort of like, you've got like trees don't move without the wind. They have the potential to move, they have the ability to do it, but they don't do it until the wind blows them. You see the difference there?
Okay.
So
I can see like what you're trying
dancing around badly.
Like I get what you're trying to get across, or at least I think I do.
Maybe I don't either. So
another example I can try and think of is that to use other real world examples, in Hinduism, you often have the case where numerous gods are just other gods in certain states.
Right.
So, for example, the goddess Shakti is seen as independent of the goddess Kali for various different reasons. But Kali is also seen as the most powerful form of Shakti in terms of energy and movement through time. So there's still that kind of connection between them, even though they're two separate deities. There's still this overlap within certain, I guess, spheres or elements that they cover that result in them having this kind of connection and association despite being distinct separate entities. If that also helps to entrench the concept in the chat's head.
Do Kyne and Mara have that sort of a relation? Because Mara is the handmaiden of Kyne, and when Alicia is asking for aid, she initially prays to Mara and gets the attention of Kyne to send Mora House and possibly Pelennor as part of that. So are those two in that sort of relation?
Well, so it definitely depends on who you ask, right?
Yeah.
So to the Imperials, Mara is very important, whereas to the Nords, she's just seen as Kyne's handmaiden. Not a bad thing at all. Like, okay, yeah, she's the handmaiden, but you got to talk to Kyne first. Whereas the Nords, the Imperials would see it as, oh, well, no, they're both equally important for various different reasons. And arguably, the Imperials would see Kynareth as more. They would see. The Imperials would see Kynareth as perhaps being more important eventually, because she is the one who gifted them the Lord's Mail to, I think it was Mora House, or was it Belharza?
Yeah.
I think it was Mora House that she gifted the Lord's Mail to.
Yes, Lord's Mail is Mora House.
Let me check real quick. Okay, all right, good. So because of that gift of an actual tangible artifact, one of their earliest, I guess you could say, god heroes, would mean that Kynareth is probably more important than Mara, but Mara is still important to them, just in a different way, if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, one of them is a sort of a war god, and the other one isn't.
Yeah, one's like a loving god.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that mean, just purely spitballing, because hey, that's what we do, does that mean that Kyne and Mara and who's the third of the triad of Nordic goddesses? Is it actually Dibella?
Kyne, Mara, and Dibella.
Does that mean that what we're looking at there is some sort of overlapping Trinitarian thing? I mean, there's the whole stages of life, maiden, mother, crone, which are possibly expressed through that. So are we looking at a single entity there that's just expressing the different stages and ways of being of life, and then you've got Kyne as the fullness of that, as in the completion of that at the end, if we're going to extend this metaphor a bit, because Kyne is the crone of those three.
I don't know.
Well, I'll put it this way: I like it, but I don't. I mean, I don't have anything to back it up, but it's good. Good world building.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing I'm hung up on right now is I made earlier connection between Kynareth and Akatosh via Ariel, and I posted in at least our Hangout chat a link to an image on the Wikia. It's a statue of Ariel, and like on his shoulders is a giant eagle or a hawk or something. And so I mean, I'm thinking about Kynareth being depicted as like a Quetzalcoatl sort of deal, a feathered serpent, or something kind of dragon-esque, but separate from the other dragons of like Akatosh. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, if she has some kind of connection to, life and death, then it would stand to reason that she has some connection to time as well. Because without time, there is no life and death. And so, I mean, I'm wondering if at some point Kynareth is a mythopoetic or subgradiated offshoot of Ariel, or something along those lines. Because we see here that they're kind of combined into one entity. So maybe Kynareth is just that feathered aspect of Ariel. Or something like that. I mean, that's kind of what I've been.
I think it's neat, but I don't know. There's just something about that I can't quite put my finger on that I feel is misplaced in that association, but I can't articulate why.
I'm just kind of fucking around with it.
My immediate thought was, if you're going to put wings on anything and connect it to Kyne, put it on the serpent and link her to Lorcan.
No,
but
I mean, especially considering she cried for his death.
Or actually, that was another thing that the interpretation of her crying after his death. Yes, crying after the death. But I've also seen it as expressed as tears of joy. As well, rather than necessarily mourning.
Yeah,
it's a happy event or possibly a happy event that the world is created, which again goes back to her being tied to the natural order as such. But you've got both sorts of things being expressed in various places, again depending on who you ask.
Yeah, and I mean,
I can't remember where I saw it.
That kind of bubbly gray, it might be this, it might be that. Like, that's the shit I love. I don't want to know the answer. I want to have a Pinky and Brain moment. Are you pondering what I'm pondering, Pinky?
Yeah, but where are we going to get a wetsuit at this time of night? Yeah, and I mean, and that is like, I mean, the biggest advantage. Like, we were just talking about this before the cast started. Is that the one of the reasons why we haven't had a 40K cast is that they're really specific in 40K. There's not a lot of wiggle room in there. There's not a lot of a fan theory. Not a lot of room for fan theories to happen. And where there is room, it's really specific. I mean, it's got to be, what's this character thinking of? It's got to be that, that kind of stuff. Things that are probably going to get resolved by an author at some point or another in the future. So, and again, that's one of the things that we like a lot about Elder Scrolls lore, and for example, Soulsborne lore is that there's a whole lot that doesn't get told to you directly, and so there's a lot of inference that can happen. Yeah. But when it comes to Kyne, there's the son's death event. Okay, go on, Buck.
Oh.
Buckney's talking in chat about the biggest example of myth for that type of thing would be the son's death event.
Oh, hang on. I think there's also might be something in I don't know if it's a book or someone ran a blog about it or something, which has the various different holidays that can be found across Tamriel.
Yep.
And I think there might be an entry or two in there for Kynareth. Let me see if I can try and find that real quick.
Oh, yeah. It was a big compilation of... Somebody posted it, I think. It was a big, huge list.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to see if I can try and find it.
There's another thought that we've mentioned it, but not really done anything about it. But are there any links that we can pull out between Kyne and Sheogorath? Because she is the mother of storms, but storms belong to the mad god.
Yeah.
There's someone in chat, I forget who brought it up earlier, that thunderstorms and rain also make for the best summoning times and rituals for Sheogorath. So there's that connection there.
Yeah, but why would you have that sort of a connection? Because she's not crazy unless
no, I think like okay, there could be the sort of madness of love or madness of despair or the lost one maybe I'm not sure
if
those are just the first things that came to mind.
If we're talking about the first storm and the first rain being linked to Lorcan, that again brings back Kyne's emotions about her husband, and how she felt, how she reacted to Lorcan's or Shaw's death, or his heart being ripped out. Anyway,
I can't find that list.
I'm trying to think of other potential connections, maybe not ones that have been pointed out to us, but just given what we know. I mean, we know that Sheogorath is responsible for the creation of basically mortal music.
Yeah.
Which would include, flutes and other wind instruments. Maybe there's something there using the breath to create music, and breath being part of Kynareth's deal.
Well, you have the kind of idea of inspiration and mad genius.
Yeah. I mean, I'm of the mind that every Atata is going to overlap with every other Atata in some way or another.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've played with for a while. So I mean, maybe that's where those two kind of intersect in a sphere kind of sense. But I mean, I'm trying to think of other. I mean, what about Jiggalag? If we think about Jiggalag,
I don't know.
I mean,
there's not been much about him. I'm kind of hoping that ESO is gonna give us something for him, because we got Sheogorath coming out of our ears, but we don't have anything about Jiggalag.
The only reference they've really had is, I think there's a Sword of Order costume weapon set that you can get, like the Sword of Jiggalag or whatever. And that's the only reference to Jiggalag I've seen, aside from Lore Master's Archive with Haskell. And possibly dialogue from Fanua 10, but people keep arguing with me, telling me that's about Lorcan and not about Jiggalag.
I mean, hey, if you're not arguing in the Elder Scrolls community, are you really doing anything at all?
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, what the hell's the point of any of this?
What's the point of all 40 plus episodes of this?
Let's see. Baconomics 7 in chat says, is there anything besides the intro to the third Pocket Guide that associates Kynareth with mystery? Because you can associate mystery with madness. And the female counterpart of Amun is Amunet, who is the Egyptian goddess of mystery. Ooh. Maybe something's there.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is something there, but I wish I could figure out what it is. Yeah. I mean, there's got to be something there, but I have no idea what it is. Yeah, and it would be really rude of me to sit here and stare off into space until I figure it out while we're on the air. Just a long piece of dead air while I just sit there and go, and just think really hard.
Well, wait, no, the Bull of Kyne is another name for Mora House.
Yeah.
Which you can get to via the Lamassu, actually, is the connection that I think I called for. Like, he's called the man bull, but the Lamassu of Assyrian mythology is a bull with wings and a man's head.
Okay.
It just strikes me as Mora House being a remixed Lamassu. And they were associated with the skies to some extent, but I don't know a whole lot about them, I must admit. But again, it's thing of creatures of the air.
Well, it says in some writings it is portrayed to represent a female deity.
Yeah. Well, Morehouse was not female.
Yeah. But I
Very,
mean,
very explicitly.
if he's representing
Kynareth,
who is associated or who is assumed to be female.
Yeah.
I mean, with Etana, we can't really say for certain, but she's Kynareth, Kyne, Arcayth, or Tava. They're always assumed to be female. Yeah. It's Sumerian, and it's no, it's an Assyrian creature.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, with Morehouse, I've always considered Morehouse to be the equivalent of like what a demi-prince is to a Daedric prince.
Yeah.
And he's called a demigod, but he's really the only instance of an Aedric demi-prince that we ever see. So I mean, we don't. I mean, aside from maybe Pelennor or something, I mean, it's weird.
Although we do get Kynareth referred to, or I can't remember whether it's Kynareth or Kyne, but she's referred to as the strongest of the spirits of the air, which kind of implies that there's more of them.
I think that's Tava.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of a different a Reddit post that this guy did called "The Many Faces of Tava." That's something different. My bad. Never mind.
And with that, the air spirits. I can't help but link that to Vivek, the Lord of the Middle Air.
Although
I've been circling around bringing up Vivek during this whole cast. I've been trying really hard not to, because I mean I always do. But yeah, now you've done it.
Yep.
I don't think is that on bingo. I don't think it's on bingo.
I don't know.
It might be. It stands to reason you can ask why Vivek is the Lord of the Middle Air.
Which I have some ideas on that, but I mean this isn't the Vivek cast. I mean if you'd like to hear it, I'm more than happy to.
Well, it might be relevant to Kynareth in the respect that
because I mean my whole thing it stems from Chinese philosophy.
Okay.
Particularly in how they think of China itself as the Middle Kingdom. And even in the symbol, the old symbol for China, it had 3 tiers to it. You have heaven on top, earth on bottom. The Middle Kingdom is in between mortal and divine. And so if we think about that with Vivek, he's also kind of in that middle space between mortal and divine. I mean, you could say that about the other 2 triads as well. But I think it's more appropriate to Vivek given his proclivity for duality and wanting to be all things and all of that. So his whole thing about being, in the middle air is he's hovering between divinity and mortality.
Well, specifically,
and, I mean, I could get into like poetry and stuff, but I mean that's
appropriate for the warrior poet.
I mean, I think his.
Well, there's also the fact that
his feet.
Yeah, there's also the fact that the sky is the domain of Ayam, and the sea is the domain of Sotha. So Vivek occupies the space between the 2 of them as the joining force, but also because the only thing left over is the land, which Vivek says belongs to the people. Or the Hortator, specifically.
Links.
Yeah.
Well, another fun thing, I may be stretching here, but in poetry, you have your in your meter, you have feet, and then IAMB is one of the most common forms of feet. And so if you look at Vivek, when he tends to be sitting in his floating lotus position, 1 foot is above the other, which I mean it kind of has to be. But is that a poetic reference? Is that referencing the I am, which can be bastardized into I am? Reference to his Kim? I don't know. I mean, that's something I noticed a long time ago, and I kind of played with it.
Although it does feel like a bit of a reach. It is a nice thought.
I mean,
I'll give it that.
That's just what goes on in my head. Oh yeah, no, I mean he's the warrior poet. Poetry is in the whole thing. Poetry and inspiration, was that something, Chris? Was that you who pointed that out, or was that you, James?
A bit of both.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple tentative links between Vivek and Kynareth, at least.
Well, yeah, but there's also a few other things with regards to Kynareth, or rather Kyne. There are two sort of Nord scald poems or odes that you have. The first one is Kyne's Tears, which is dark clouds gather in the sky above. Kyne weeps for joy at the beauty of the world. Tears warm the ground and blossoms grow. The sacred stone reveals the flowers of her tears. So that's one. And then there's another one, which is a hymn to Kyne, which is in darkness, your light shines through. Warrior goddess, for you we strike true. When hope is lost and war rages on, warrior goddess, hear our blessed song. With the Nords' death fallen in battle, warrior goddess, guide us through shadow. Grant us courage to fight and sharpen our swords, warrior goddess, mother of Nords. So, I mean, there's a couple things to unpack there, especially when they're talking about how it's her light in darkness that shines through, which has given me some Magna Key vibes, not gonna lie.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
And if she's the one who's ferrying these souls to Sovngarde, which is this place in the sky, like, what are we thinking? Was she, like, sort of closest to a Magna Key before she decided, fuck it, I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna put my life on the line for all these beautiful little dumbass Nord babies I just gave birth to?
Well, the Khajiit myth actually has Kynareth feeling lonely in the sky. That everyone that Nirni was told to make children to keep, almost to keep Kynareth happy and give Kynareth company. But let me just double check the wording of that, because it's a little awkward and I don't want to misconstrue. But yeah. But Kynareth went to Fadamai and said, Fadamai, mother, Kynareth grows lonely so high above the world and not even my brother Alkosh can fly. And Fadamai took pity on her and tricked Anur to make her pregnant again. And that's where the moons come from.
Okay.
Yeah, the moons and Nirni and Azura. She's the third litter. That's the third litter from Fadamai. In the Khajiit myth, all done to please Kynareth, which again ties back to
give her souls to keep.
Yeah, give her souls to keep and give her a place where things happen, which again goes back to the thing in Variety. I'm sure it's Variety of Faith.
Probably that book is like a source in every
yeah. Yeah. In some legends, she's the first to agree to Lorkhan's plan to invent the mortal plane and provides the space for its creation in the void.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
So yeah, that feels quite like quite similar to the Khajiit take that Kyne, Kynareth, the K spirit, whatever her name is one of the prime movers and the prime reason for the mortal world happening in the first place. Everyone gets hung up on Lorkhan and Magnus, but Kyne is, to some degree, the inspiration and the reason that it happens.
That's neat. There's a lot here to unpack, boys.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can do it all in an hour and a half. So, okay.
Yeah.
That exasperated sigh. Oh God. But okay, so to sort of pull on that thread of tricking baby daddy into making you pregnant to make someone else happy, why would she do that beyond just the company of it? Is that because she needs that sphere to be fulfilled? In which case, that kind of seems like in the Khajiit pantheon, she's almost taking over from Arcayth in that sense. You know, like ferrying the souls of the dead up to Sovngarde and everything. That's also her kind of taking over in the Redguard Pantheon the spot or the job that Tuwaka has. His job is to ferry the dead to the far shores.
Yeah.
Kyne's job is to ferry the souls of the dead safely into Sovngarde.
Although it's not in the Khajiit myth, she's not associated with that though. She's not. The Khajiit go to the moons and the sun and the sand behind the stars and that side of it. So they get there eventually. But I also just noticed that.
By the way, I hope everyone realizes that the sand behind the stars is basically another name for the far shores.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm just putting that into people's heads.
Yes.
So if you imagine the far shores, it's a bunch of black people and cats just chilling out, living their best afterlives.
Except for that one priest who's allergic.
And there's a couple Yokunins there, like sharpening their swords. You know, are you elves? Shh. I heard you're elves. Shh.
Quiet. Shh.
But no. To get back on track though. Okay, so sorry, I didn't know that part about that they went to the moons instead. But yeah, that still doesn't fully answer the question though of like,
no.
So why are we having all these extra babies to make Kynareth happy? Like what?
We've got if Massa and Secunda fail, they the Khajiit must climb Kynareth's breath to set the moons back in their courses. It's something that happens later on.
Okay, so the Khajiit definitely go to the far shores then. Oh my god.
Oh, hang on. Are you claiming that Kynareth is busily assembling an army of ghost Khajiit in the far shores in case things go to hell?
Yeah, actually. Why not?
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense now.
Yeah.
Because think about it. What is the far shores except for a place of waiting until the next skin when everything kind of resets? It's the big giant reset button. So yeah, she's like building up this army. You got the far shores and Sovngarde kind of, just waiting there to do their shit again.
Yeah. Would that be the opposite of the Dromothra?
I don't know enough about Khajiit mythology to answer that. Maybe
because the Dromothra are the bent cats. They align like their song or whatever to the beating of the drum, of the doom drum of the darkness in Lorkhan's heart.
Yep.
And they're taken to into Namira or Namira's realm to become unbent. That's basically it. So I mean, they're effectively like atoning demons in a manner of thinking. But I can imagine, the opposite. These exalted Khajiit who Kynareth takes and I can just imagine they're just these radiant kind of holy ghost warriors.
It's not quite as selective as you make out. I don't think that everything that I've seen is that you either become a bent cat or you are I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say straight cat because I'm not sure that's the term that gets used. No. But you are
prostrate.
Yeah, you are either bent or you are not bent. There, it's a binary there. So so you've got the cats that will go to the stand behind the stars. And do whatever they do there.
Hang out with the best race.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how we got onto this.
It started with we were talking about Kynareth, who's again one of the many other aspects of Kynareth, or the K goddess. The special K.
How did I know that was happening?
Because I'm terrible, and you know by this point.
Yeah, true.
But anyway, we're talking about her and her influence and how she had this third litter that was created specifically for her so that she'd be less lonely.
Right.
And I guess to sort of try, now that I've had a bit of a chance to think about it and all this other stuff we've talked about, I think the loneliness in this case might come from the fact that she's away from, like her being Kynareth is away from her husband Lorcaj, right? And that sort of similar kind of mixing. So that would be why she's lonely.
The special K sign in the K sign of the Magnagi is the K of black ink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was just kind of spitballing there a little bit. Well, hey, what if?
Yeah. But Buck has mentioned about Thume altering cats in Drosera, in the Tale of Drosera, which I can't see it on a quick skim through. Anyway, just ignore me. I'm going to be skimming for a while to try and find this.
Oh, well, that's all right. I think honestly, barring any,
there's some connection.
I don't think there's any likelihood that we're going to find anything earth-shattering at this point. I mean, I think we've covered everything. Does anybody know who's next?
After K should be J. Wait, no, JK.
No, other way.
Mara's next, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
All right.
Mama.
So yeah, we're gonna do that next. Also, I wanted to mention I am literally on the very last entry for the next sermon, the sermon 21. So we're definitely gonna have that out by the end of the year at the way things are going.
Awesome.
I'm still trying to figure out a way to get these things built faster than one a year, but we'll all right. Yeah, something's got to happen so that this stuff starts speeding up, is all I'm saying. It's gonna have to be something. I mean, I don't know what it is, but they're taking way too long. Yeah, so we will hopefully be back here in 2 weeks. So not next weekend, but the weekend after.
Talk about Mara.
Yeah, for Mara. It's not your fault, Buck. It's mine.
That way it doesn't interfere with Canadian Thanksgiving.
And I should have the newest issue of the Talmora available either tonight or tomorrow. Hey. I'm still waiting on some cover art. We've got an exclusive interview with Lawrence Schick, post Sauce, in there.
Pretty good.
Yeah, good stuff. We also started a recurring segment called Tea Time with Neloth.
I remember that.
So it's just Neloth shooting the shit with just other characters in lore. It's just an RP interview.
Okay, great.
It's a lot of fun.
Nice.
The first one's Baron Zaya. So the two of them are having tea and just shooting the shit. It's fantastic.
It's like you should do it like a like one of those late night interview things, you know.
Was our Baron Zaya.
Jeez.
Telvanni and Cars getting coffee.
If we are I'm talking about Telmora, I am still in the process of compiling my history of the Elder Scrolls fandom and changes and attitudes and all that.
Cool.
Whenever you've got that ready, there's no rush.
No, if anyone wants to send me their perspectives or stuff with that, I can send you a list of questions I've been asking everyone, or just your perspectives on how fans have reacted to new games, how how that's changed over time. If you've got anything to send to that, drop it to writtenuncertaintypodcast@gmail.com. I've got a rough theme already. I'm pretty certain that the title for the thing is going to be "And Then the Awful Gaming Began Again."
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think I can wrap up fans' reactions to new Elder Scrolls games in one word, and that's badly. No. All right.
But yeah, if you have any kind of stories you want to tell me about your experience within the fandom, within the lore community, within the Elder Scrolls community as a whole, please
send it to me and I'll fill it out for you. And yeah,
cool.
All right, folks.
Also, Andrew, coming your way. I can't say when, but I'm starting to talk with LJ about some spicy stuff that may or may not prove my implication or like heresy that Magnus So that Numidium may be Magnus or the shell of Magnus. So I'm trying to figure out some things. It's still really early, but I'm just saying that is sort of the next thing. So before how I just had, Trinimac might be Tall Papa.
Yeah.
This next one will be Numidium might be.
Yeah, man.
It's just
that'll be good.
I want it.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to wait for it. Unfortunately, it'll be a while.
Yeah. Oh yeah. One. I think the December issue is going to be a takeover issue. Adam Fields is going to be dropping some heavy lore bombs. He's been working on with MK, with Ted Peterson. He's got Marsha Kogan on board. He's got Jasser on board. Just a lot of heavy hitters helping him with this takeover issue. It's gonna be rad. And Franz is gonna help too.
Like a takeover is in like what you're retiring from it?
Probably yeah. So he's gonna build the entirety of the magazine. I'll probably have my whatever opinion articles going in there, and then just kind of the recurring bits like the correspondence and whatever. But everything else, that's all him.
Okay, wow.
Okay.
And that group. So yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, everybody, we goodbye.
Yep. Is there anything else we want to?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
Is it?
Bye, internet.
Nope. That's it. All right.
Bye, everybody.
I'll miss you.